Ideally, a worldview should be evaluated in comparison with other worldviews, at least with the major alternatives.
Right. So
easier to see.
That's right. So here's worldview A, worldview B, and we're trying to determine what's going on there. So we kind of compare how each worldview assesses the thing that we're considering.
Right.
Kind of thing. The thing in the world.
Yeah. Here's a table, and poof, an apple suddenly appears. Well, in the atheistic worldview, the materialist worldview, that stuff should happen at least more than once.
That's right.
Or if it happened once, it has the ability to happen more than once. There's nothing that precludes it from happening. But with Christianity too, you have the evidence of miracles. So okay, how do we evaluate that? Okay, we're going to dig deeper on that.
Yeah.
The reason for this is that if we think a certain worldview faces some difficulty or problem, we might be tempted to dismiss it simply for that reason. Right. Without taking proper time to consider whether competing worldviews face the same or similar challenges, or perhaps even greater challenges.
Right. So here's worldview X, and it has a problem with this particular issue, this particular fact in the world. I guess we throw it away, right? And he says, no. How does worldview Y deal with that same thing? If worldview X deals with it better than worldview Y, then we shouldn't throw worldview X away, right, kind of thing, all right? So in other words, rather than asking which worldview passes all the tests without any problems, right, we should ask which worldview passes the test better than any other worldview, right? And he says we'll then be able to see which worldview is the most reasonable to believe, right?
So one final observation here that Anderson wants to make is that when evaluating worldviews, it's important to remember that each worldview should be evaluated on its own terms, not by the standards and expectations of some other worldview. Right? If you're going to take an external worldview to it, and you're like, well, that's not what I believe.
Right.
So
based on my worldview, your worldview is wrong.
Right. That's the whole point of this exercise. So we want to look at internally consistency. That's why for presuppositionalists, we talk about assume that the other person's worldview is true for the sake of the argument.
Right.
What would we see as the result of that?
What would we expect to see?
Right.
Yeah.
So suppose you're comparing two worldviews, worldview X and Y. If worldview X is allowed to sit on the judge's bench when worldview Y is on trial, it would hardly be surprising to find that worldview Y is found guilty simply because it isn't worldview X. Right? That's how judgment works. That's, you can't ever get outside of, your worldview. So take for granted that worldview Y is accurate. What would we see as the result when evaluating it at the best that we can? One might as well argue that the English language is flawed because it doesn't follow grammatical rules of Latin.
Right. So English must be wrong because Latin is our worldview language, right? And English doesn't follow the rules of Latin, so English is wrong. Well, wait a minute, right? We want to evaluate English on its own, right? And not just through the view of my Latin language.
Although teaching a 5-year-old English seems to be true that English is wrong.
And so he says finally that he wants to emphasize this point because people who criticize Christianity often do so without realizing that their objections actually take for granted some other worldview than Christianity, right? And so he says no one should reject Christianity simply because it's not some other worldview, right? That it isn't something that's Christianity, right? Christianity is wrong. Why? Well, because it's not this worldview. Well, wait a minute. Let's look at it in terms of...
It doesn't allow me to do everything that I want to do. If Christianity were true, it would let me.
Yeah.
Well, that's not what Christianity says that you can do. Okay.
Yeah. Good.